This is a replacement video correcting an error that was in the earlier video. So again, a very rough video that isn't my standard tutorial videos here because it's just a solution for our midterm exam that I wanted to post as quickly as possible. As promised, this is the second half of the Swift heavy midterm. The iOS concepts in this test were pretty easy for my students. The rest of the exam was covered in the prior video using Playground, so it was Swift heavy. They also had to build this sample Magic 8-Ball style Halloween app. They had the material in both of these videos to complete during a 2.5-hour class just a few weeks after starting class. This was the first programming class for a good portion of my students. Now, even though this app is basic, by the end of the course, they'll be full stack developers. We're going to work in Google's cloud. So this is a quiz early on in their iOS journey. It's a very basic app. That said, here's the app. It launches. There's nothing on the first screen. Press the predict button. An image fades in, plus we get a prediction and a spooky sound that's associated with the image. The predictions are from the Magic 8-Ball set of predictions, so you can keep clicking again. Notice when you do that, there's a simple alpha animation as well, going from fully transparent to fully opaque over half a second. We've got randomization in here, some very basic UI kit work. So the images and sounds are very spooky, including Fauci saying coronavirus. And now here are the exam questions and the solution for building this app. So first things up, I'm going to launch Xcode and I'm going to create a UI kit app on storyboards named Swifty Halloween. And I'm also going to copy this URL that has 3 folders. It's got the icon for the app as well as sounds and images. So I'll launch Xcode, create the project. Again, it's a UI kit project using storyboards. Name it Swifty Halloween. I'm going to save mine to the desktop. Then I'm going to paste in that URL. That's bit.ly/halloween-app-files, all lowercase. You could copy that from the first page of the exam. And I'm going to download these 3 folders from Google. Then once downloaded, I'm going to head over to Xcode, click on the Assets catalog. I'm going to delete the app icon set that's in there, and I'm going to return and drag over the 3 folders that were just downloaded. That gives you an app icon, so the app has an icon, there's some images, and there are sounds. Then for setting up the UI, I give specific instructions. So a button with a title that says Predict, the size is 160 by 42, the font is System Bold 30, the font color is black, the background color is tangerine, and constrain at 20 from the bottom, and with the height and the width that you have above, and center it horizontally in container. So I'm going to return to the main storyboard and click on the plus button up top and drag a button over, and I'll drag this over toward the bottom of my view controller. I'll click on the attributes inspector and change the title from button to predict with an exclamation point. Then I'll head over to the size inspector with the button clicked, and I'm going to change the width to 160 and the height to 42. I'll head back to the attributes inspector. I'm going to change the font. I'm at a custom font here, so I'm going to select system first to go back to the system font. And under style, I'm going to select bold, and I'm going to set the size to 32. Then scrolling down to the bottom, I'm going to change the tint color to black, and for the background color, I'm going to pull up my color palette. I'm going to take a look at the color pencils, and I'm going to click on this orange one here. We see it's called tangerine, and the button is all set. In quick jump cut, I usually suggest to my students to design on the smallest possible iPhone they would use. So currently that would be the iPhone SE, the first edition. So I'm going to head over there, and I laid out the button on a larger iPhone, so it's way down here. But what I'm going to do is, now that I've clicked on that button, I'm just going to head to the size inspector, change the Y value to a smaller value, and now I can see my button. Reposition my predict button, then I'm going to set my constraints, bottom to 20. I'll set the width and height to their size, 160 and 42. Then I'll align this horizontally in the container. Now back on the exam question, I mentioned that you should refer to code that executes when you click this button as predict button pressed. And here are the criteria for the label and the image view that we're going to add, and I'll call out what we're doing as we design that. So back in the storyboard, click the library, drag a label over. I'm going to add some bogus text in here just so that I can have some text to look at as I'm designing things. I'll say, imagine that there are a lot of lines and a lot of text in here. Then I'm going to set the number of lines to 3. And then I'm going to resize my label. I'm going to set the font pulling down system to select large title. Then I'm going to set the alignment to center. I'll add constraints, 16 to the left, 16 to the right, and 8 points from the top of the predict button. I'll also set the height to 100 and add 4 constraints. I can see my font is kind of cramped, so I'm going to click on auto shrink, and I'm going to select minimum font scale. We can see that the fonts all squeeze in. Then I'll drag an image view. I'll position the left corner toward the upper left top of the 2 margins, resize it, and set my constraints 8 from the top, 16 to the 2 sides, 8 from the bottom, so that'll be the top of the label. Add 4 constraints, and the interface is laid out. So now I just need to create my IB outlets and my IB actions. I'm going to click on View Controller, then Option click on Main Storyboard, so I'm in assistant mode with these side by side. I'll control drag over from the image view, and I will call that image view, and then I'll control drag over from the label, and I'm going to call that message label. Then I'll control drag from the button, and I'll let go just above the last curly. This is going to create an action. I'm going to name that predict button pressed, and now I can close the main storyboard, and we're ready to code. Question C says when the app runs, there should be no text in the message label and no image displayed in the image view. So we've got nothing in the image view, but let's clear out what's in the message label. We'll do that within view did load. I'm going to get rid of the comment that we have here, and then we'll just enter message label.text equals empty string. So then in question D, I say the images have these names here and that they should be stored in an array called items. So why don't we highlight and copy the strings that we'll put inside of an array? I'll return to Xcode and we'll create a constant property, let items equals, and this is going to be an array. So in square brackets, paste that in, we've got our items array. Then back in Xcode, I remind you that the sounds have the same names as the items with underscore sound at the end of them, so we'll want to pay attention to that when we play our sounds. We also want to create an array named messages that holds the messages that are in the Magic 8-Ball toy, and you can get those at this particular URL, bit.ly Swift 8-Ball. So if you return to the browser, paste in that URL, you see this Google Doc, you can highlight and copy all of these strings, then we can return to Xcode and we'll create an array let messages equals, and in brackets I'm going to paste in all of those strings. We've got our messages set up. And so now to finish this, again, a really simple app. It's when the predict button is tapped, a random image should be displayed in the image view. It should initially be invisible, but then fade into completely opaque over half a second. The sound associated with that image should also play, so that should be the same element from the items array, but with underscore sound to access that sound, and a random message from the messages array should also be displayed. So back in Xcode, let's get a random item from the items array, and we'll do that with let random item equals items.random element, open and close parens, and this is going to give us an optional, but I can force unwrap this because I'm 100% sure that I've got elements inside of random element. We'll also need a random message since those are different, so I'll say let random message equal messages.random element, again open and close parens and exclamation point. Then we want to make sure that our label and our image view are going to be invisible. So we'll set message label.alpha. Remember, the alpha is the transparency property, and when we set alpha to 0.0, it's going to be completely transparent. Then later on in our animation, we'll change that to 1.0, which will make it completely opaque, and we'll do that over half a second. Down here, we'll do something similar with the image view. Image view.alpha equals 0.0 as well. And now that the message label and the image view are invisible, let's go ahead and change the values inside of them. So that'll be message label.text equals random message. And we'll say image view.image equals UI image open parens name, and we're going to pass in random item because those are the names of the different image files that are in our assets catalog. Then I'm going to put in a to-do comment here to say play sound. We're eventually going to want to play sound, but I'll put that on pause for a moment. Then we're going to animate, and we do that with UI view.animate. I'm going to select this option with duration and animations. The duration is going to be 0.5 for half a second. Then after animations, we put in curly braces, and inside those curly braces, we put in the statements that represent the end state that we want to arrive at after 0.5 seconds, and iOS will handle all the animation for us. All we need to do is just put in the end state. So in between the curlies, we'll put in two lines that set the alpha for the message label to 1.0 and the alpha for the image view to 1.0. And yes, there was a jump cut in here because I was correcting an error that I initially recorded in here. So now let's add audio, and remember what we've got to do is import AV Foundation up top. Then we need to create an audio player object. I'm going to leave this error in here that I originally made, let audio player AV audio player exclamation point, and I'm getting this error here that the class view controller has no initializers because this is a constant. Remember, if we're going to change something, it's got to be a variable, so I'm going to change let to var. Things work. Then let's create our play sound function, and my students have done this many times already in class. Func play sound, and we're going to be passing in name, which is a string, and in between the curlies, we'll see if we can create an NS data asset from something which is in the asset catalog. So we'll say if let sound equals NS data asset, and we're going to pass in name. Now this is a string. It's going to try to get that data from the asset catalog. Now if this doesn't work and we create a nil, we're not able to create that sound constant, then we're going to go down here and say else, and in between the curlies, we'll print out an error. Could not read data from file, and in string interp, I'll just put in name. Now, hopefully you'll never see that, and in the top part of this if condition here, I'm going to put in a do and catch. And the reason I'm going to put a do in here is if I try to initialize the AV audio player variable, I'm going to say audio player equals AV audio player. And then to create that AV audio player, I'm going to say AV audio player, and in parentheses, if I use the option to pass in a data, notice that this throws a value. So that means that we're going to have to use a try, and we're going to have to put this inside of a do catch. Now notice this also accepts a data type. So what we're going to be passing in here isn't sound, because that's the NS data asset. So that's everything from the file that we imported from the asset catalog. We just need to get the data inside of that. So that's why we say sound.data. Then we can put a try in front, and the catch should just print an error string interp. In the string interp, error.localize description, could not initialize AV audio player object. And let's not forget, after we initialize the audio player object, we're going to take that audio player object and use its .play method. That's going to play the sound for us. Then back in the to-do comment that we made in predict button press, we'll just call play sound name, and we're going to pass in between quotes. We'll do a string interp, and remember all of our sounds end in _sound, but inside the string interp, we're just going to put in random item. That'll get the random item sound that matches the random item image. Let's go ahead and set this to build in an iPhone 13 Pro and build and run. Let's see what we get. So I'll adjust my screen size, and then we can click on the predict button. And look at that, things are looking good. We've got the sound matching up to the image, but we've got a random message coming in from the Magic 8-Ball list. Nice job building the Swifty Halloween App, Swifter. Hope you're feeling good about your skills. Keep at it.
Coronavirus. Coronavirus.
I'm David Pumpkins!